On today's episode of Just Wondering, we'll begin by touching on a couple of stories that we had last week, but that have updates for you. Next, a far-reaching and often emotional interview with former star Cowboy defensive lineman Tony Casillas. And then, losing a really good friend.
And now, a word from our title sponsor.
Eyeing retirement? We aim to turn your nest egg into a paycheck with half the amount you've been led to believe. Fluent Financial combines in-house portfolio design risk management with income-generating investments designed to aid your financial independence. Our goal is to develop an effective portfolio strategy to help you retire sooner and have a better lifestyle. Fluent Financial can also implement a program that allows business owners to install a cash balance plan, which may potentially reduce income tax payments. You've worked hard to become successful. Let us help develop an effective portfolio strategy that works for you. Learn more today about Fluent Financial. Retire sooner, better lifestyle. For more information or to schedule a meeting, visit fluentfinancial.com or call 972-852-4800.
New developments in the ongoing drama of the Cowboys' left tackle job. All offseason, the Cowboys assured everyone there would be open competition for the starting left tackle job. In the 2 years since he was the club's first-round pick, Tyler Guyton has done little to impress. Plus, he missed starting 13 of the club's 34 games over those 2 years. Nate Thomas and, to some degree, rookie fourth-round pick Drew Shelton would be given chances in training camp to unseat Guyton for the left tackle job. At least, that was the story. Well, less than a week into camp, head coach Brian Schottenheimer had made the decision. The job was Guyton's, except that, well, a couple of days later, the coach said the job was, well, still not decided. He said that what he meant was that Nate Thomas had better start playing better if he wanted to compete with Guyton for the left tackle job. There's apparently no thinking to slide Tyler Smith from his left guard position out to left tackle because, well, I think Tyler Smith has made it plain. He doesn't want to be yanked around this season from tackle to guard, and if he's going to play left tackle, he expects to be paid like a left tackle, which would be about $5 million a year more, an amount I don't think the Cowboys are excited to add to Smith's already $24 million a year contract. So the whole thing, Guyton's in competition, Guyton's got the job, wait a minute, he doesn't have the job. It made the club look a little silly. But you know what? It does seem certain that Guyton is going to be the starting left tackle on this team. So, starting at this very moment, Cowboy fans, begin crossing your fingers. And next, last week we discussed the Protect College Sports Act. All these bills going through Congress have wonderful names to them. This is a bill that Congress is working on to apparently set guardrails as to how much money could be spent on college athletics in a given year. Now, Congress is the same body that can't put much in the way of guardrails on what they're spending in America these days. But that's another subject. So the government's going to get into this deal of protecting college sports from itself. Well, the Big Ten and the SEC originally objected to some things, but you know what? A couple of weeks ago, they signed on. The Big Ten and the SEC, well, they'd gotten some of the concessions they wanted that made the bill a lot more palatable to them, so they signed on. So then the bill would go to the Senate committee, who would vote to send it to the Senate floor, and the Senate would vote to pass it on and move it to within that far of being a bill in the United States, a passed bill, except for one thing. When it got to the Senate committee, two senators from SEC states, by the way, Missouri and Alabama, had their own objections to the Protect College Sports Act. And they held up passage of the bill from committee. And then, of course, the Senate had to take its 5 weeks vacation. Don't we all get 5 weeks vacation? How does this country run with the Senate? Well, that's another topic, too. But they'll be back in mid-September, and maybe then we'll all figure out a way to protect college sports. What do you want from your favorite restaurant? Fantastic personal service, a cheery, welcoming, spotless atmosphere, and, of course, great food. The primest of beef, wagyu and lamb, incredibly fresh seafood, lobster, salmon, shrimp. Hall of Fame food from a Hall of Fame restaurant. 2 locations of Bob's Steak and Chop House, the original Bob's on Lemon Avenue, and the gorgeous new Bob's at Craig Ranch, McKinney. Do you bet on football? I'm Norm Hitzges, and I've been handicapping sports for the last 5 decades. And what an incredible last 2 years we've had picking games. For all of our college and pro football selections, plus the NCAA basketball tournament, we've posted a wonderful 527 winners and 434 losers. After subtracting the juice, if you're a $200 a game player, that's a tidy profit of right at $10,000. And unlike those big betting services, we don't cost an arm and a leg. $200. That's it. $200 for the entire package of football and basketball picks, emailed right to you every week. Sign up by clicking on the link below, and let's have another solid, profitable year. My wife Mary's the co-creator of Full Moon Healing Balm, and I guess I'm the reason this terrific cream was developed. A few years ago, I began getting these huge, ugly blood blotches just beneath the skin of my arms and hands. The condition's called senile purpura. And no, you don't have to be senile to experience this embarrassment. It happens as you age. And then to cover it up, we begin wearing long sleeves, even when it's hot. It took 2 years working with a New Jersey lab to refine the all-natural ingredients of Full Moon Healing. Gently massage a very small amount into the skin, and within a day, the blotches begin to fade. Senile purpura usually takes weeks to disappear, but this balm cuts the timeline to about a week. And ordering's so easy. Just go to the website, fullmoonhealingco.com. Tony Casillas is one of the most decorated defensive linemen of all time in football. He was a star at Oklahoma, a national championship-winning Oklahoma team in 1985. That same year, he was an All-American, the UPI Lineman of the Year, the Lombardi Trophy given to the best lineman in college football. He graduated from Oklahoma with a degree in public relations, was an academic All-American, by the way, and was the college defensive player of the decade in the 1980s. Then on to the NFL, a second-round draft choice in Atlanta. 5 years later, a trade to Dallas. There's a bit of a story there we'll get into. And then a starting defensive tackle on back-to-back Cowboys Super Bowl champions. Tony spent 12 years in the league, finishing his career with Dallas in 1997. He's in the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, the College Football Hall of Fame. And Tony, I could go on, but it's time we started talking.
Well, first of all, Norm, I appreciate it. It's an honor to always be able to, talk with you and be on your show. And I say this wholeheartedly, when people talk to you, they become a lot smarter when it comes to understanding sports, whether it's horse racing, whether it's life. And I really appreciate you having me on, brother. It means a lot.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you, Tony. When you left here 3 decades ago, left here as a player, could you ever imagine that in the 3 decades since, the Cowboys would never even play in an NFC championship game?
No. And then you look at what all the other teams have done in the NFC East, especially the Eagles. It kind of tips your hat and how old you are when you start talking about, back in, 30 years ago, since the Cowboys have been in an NFC championship. We all know the narrative, but it still resonates. It is a huge legacy to be part of those 90s teams. But, I always, the ongoing joke for me is that, people say, well, what do you call a Dallas Cowboy with a Super Bowl ring? I'm like, what? And they said, ancient. So we're kind of the bulk of the jokes, but that's something we'll always have to, the resume, as you mentioned, and be part of those teams of the 90s were insurmountable. It's just, it's pretty vivid when you look back at it. I mean, start reflecting on it, start talking about it, because it does bring back so many great memories.
You played for 2 of the most storied and successful coaches in the history of football. Let's start with Barry Switzer. Now, Barry can come off at times as being, I mean this honestly as a compliment, he can come off at times as being a little goofy, but his record is incredible. What made him such a good coach?
Well, I think his transparency really made him a great coach, because I think the media, there was not much speculation. Coach Switzer is going to basically tell you how it is, and there's not really anything to speculate what he may be thinking. And I think as a media person, that's kind of what you want to have. But I wouldn't say goofy. I would say just a guy beyond being a coach, the life after football, and being able to have him as a loyal friend, someone you can reach out to, someone that it shows up for you long after you play the game of football. And it's amazing, Norma, how many players, former players, not just former players, but people that have this connection and talk to Coach Switzer, because he's so charismatic. He's right to the point, and I think people appreciate that. And I do. The authenticity of him as a person in general is you can't find that. And I think that's what makes him so unique as a person, not only a coach, because he's able to recruit and obviously just be able to coach. But you mentioned it, his record speaks for itself. He's had a ton of success. And again, I just can't reiterate what he's done off the field, whether it's charity, whether it's, players showing up for players and being there for you in hard times and good times. I mean, there's not too many people I can think of that I know, especially of his character and especially of his persona, that would be there for you at a drop of a hat.
Tony, you then won 2 Super Bowls, starting at defensive tackle for Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy has a bit of an unusual reputation also as a coach. Tell us what it was like playing for Jimmy Johnson.
Well, it's 2 different. When you mentioned Barry and you mentioned Jimmy, totally different philosophies. at times Jimmy was crazy as far as the way he motivated people and players. And you look back, like, how did I survive that? That was, that was a form of abuse, but not in, you look at modern day football and you look at what we went through, and really that's kind of what we needed as a group. And was able, his way of just motivating through example, through using different scenarios. I mean, the guy had a psychology degree, and he definitely had a master's and doctor's in that because he was doctor degree in that because he's able to execute that. And I look back at all the different stories and everything that he did. And, I owe a lot to Coach Johnson. He saved my football life. I was in Atlanta for 2 years. I was the second player picked in the draft behind Bo Jackson, and came from a program like Oklahoma, and then going to, at the time, was more like the Cleveland Browns in the NFL, and that was Atlanta Falcons. So, when I was traded, I got the call from him. I knew Jimmy when he was at Oklahoma State. I had all the staff that was at Oklahoma and Miami, the Dave Wansteads, the Butch Davises, Larry Coker. I mean, he was went on to be the head coach at Miami. So you had all these different nucleus of coaches you had, but the way his tactics as far as motivating and setting an example, and I always say this, those teams, we needed a strong leader, because as we know that you've seen all the stories, you've seen the documentary. That's truth. But he was able to delegate and to be able to work with different personalities on that team, and really just kind of use his way of motivating, not through fear, but just being uncomfortable with your success. And I think that that's really just kind of made us humble. And again, the stories about not, feeding us on the way home from a loss to Washington. I mean, it was great. Hey, we're having this open bar on the way home after a win. But I tell you what, if you lost the game, you better keep your head down and not be in Coach Johnson's vision. I mean, you've been on the plane. He starts twitching that lip, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna bow my head or pretend I'm asleep, or I don't want to make eye contact, because if you made eye contact, you just kind of be like that. He was like, sends your soul.
Tony, he was famous for playing mind games with people. Did he play any with you?
He did. I think for me, I was kind of those guys that when I came from Atlanta to Dallas, I mean, it was just this different energy, Norm, because I came from the Falcons, where it's just totally just the bottom line was to make money as an organization, and they really didn't have the brand or the dynasty of the Cowboys, Atlanta. So, I think the thing that really got to me when he made me inactive, because for some reason he just felt like against Washington, and I was just, that really, hurt, deep inside. I'm like, well, what are you doing, and what did I do? And we had so much depth on that defensive line as you go back, of all the great players we had. So I think that to me at that point, I didn't handle it the right way. I mean, I let my emotions be known to Coach Johnson and the staff, but it worked out for me. I mean, obviously the next week I was, part of the rotation and starting. But again, the success, I think the measure of success that you have in a coach and his philosophy, that's what really adds up. I mean, it's the end result and buying into what his decisions are. And I think that was the only time that I really just second guessed Coach Johnson, because I felt like that I was a player that fit in the system and was a very heavy contributor. But that one stung. That one stung whenever he made me an actor.
Tony, now the world, America, is much more understanding of what we call, and that can cover an enormous number of situations, mental health difficulties. But you encountered some of those in the 80s. Tell us the challenges you faced at that period.
Well, Norm, I think that, now as you look at it, I mean, I was one of those guys that had a great amount of anxiety. And back then, they didn't really diagnose it as anxiety. It was just, you just suck it up and don't deal with it. Yeah. Football players they're Teflon. They don't have feelings. They don't feel. They don't look at things differently. We're gladiators. And, So in the '80s was tough. When I left to go to Oklahoma. I mean, my first year, there was a lot of adversity. I got injured, and really just I decided that football wasn't for me, and so I actually went back home, uh, and just really didn't have the toughness to get through the adversity of being away from home in a system and being recruited as a five-star football player, and all of a sudden you get there and you're like there's other five-star players. I'm in Oklahoma, and you just join the crowd, and so I think there was a amount of frustration, amount of how I fit in. Was this for me? And so I took kind of the kind of the short road, and that's become my anxiety. And so I went back to Tulsa, and then here comes Coach Switzer calling me and saying, I need you to come back. I believe in you. And I was injured at the time, and I was just it was a dark place. I wasn't I just didn't really feel like that college football was for me. So he basically said, "Hey, I want you to come here and be the best Mexican I ever coached." I mean, that was his introduction. If you talk about Coach Switzer, like, okay, well, growing up in Oklahoma, it wasn't really cool being brown in Oklahoma. So, but I'll take that as a compliment from you, Coach Switzer. So I remember taking a Greyhound bus with me and my best friend, who's still my longtime best friend. Took a bus back and had one bag, and Bobby Witt picked me up at the bus station and gave me a ride back because he's a baseball player at Oklahoma at the time. And so, the rest is history. I mean, it was still challenges after that. But, I just realized that I was this person that had anxiety, that really just, at times when, there was doubt, that you really didn't know how to funnel that and channel those emotions. And, so finally, I just kind of figured it out that that's part of it. But we didn't talk about mental health back then, Norm. We didn't in the '80s and the '90s. It's just you were weak, or you're just
Yeah.
you're crazy, or just goofy, or whatever it may give, whatever the terminology was. And so as a football player, you don't want to hear that because you're this, like I said, this Teflon person, and you want to let those things bounce off you. But ultimately you had to deal with a different way and just kind of get through it and realize on that mental toughness, if you will, to lean on. But certainly it wasn't talked about like it is now. And I think that's the best thing that, you have Dak Prescott, you have these players have Mental Health Awareness Month, and they talk about those things because those things need to be talked about now. It's some things you shouldn't bury. You have to deal with it. And if you share it, it may help someone else that's dealing with the same thing.
You played more than a decade and a half in defensive lines at Oklahoma and the NFL. We are now finding out more and more year by year of the kind of toll football can take on your body. Are you worried about what the game might have done to you long term?
Yeah, I think I've worried about it a lot, and I know certainly through the concussion protocol of not having that back in when we were in my era. I don't know how many times I had my bell rung, and the way you just the way the protocols, count to 10 backwards. Who's the president of the United States? Here's some smelling salt. He's fine, and you're back on the field because that's the kind of way you dealt with it. And looking back at that, and looking at, and obviously physically, and you look at your body, and the residual effects of it as you get older. It's real. I mean, it's real. I mean, I see guys that are in a lot worse shape than I am, and I think one thing that I really try to is more of a preventative care, and that's to work out, to keep my mind busy. I think that's been a really good remedy for me to be active and to be able to be in the present when it comes to that. And I could use that as an excuse, but I really just, I live with the philosophy of trying to rewind the clock, if you will, and not really understanding what football does to your body. But no doubt about it, if any player says that it played as long as I have or did, and say that they have no residual effects of playing the game of football, that's just that's not true because you live with it every day. And I think, Norm, your pain threshold is different than other people. And, what my pain level may be to the normal person may be intolerable. But, for me, I just learned to deal with it and to do different things to treat it, to stay active, to do things. I mean, I see you going on vacations all over the world. I mean, who doesn't want to be like Norm, as far as seeing some of the places you travel? So, understandably, that's kind of the way you have to live your life and really not get to a point where you just let yourself go. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of guys, and this, that have played, and either whether they're 25 years out, whether they're 10 years out, I mean, they forget that they were an athlete. And to me, that really is perplexing because, some guys may have a physical issue where they can't do things and work out and take care of themselves. But it really is not an excuse. And I try to be an advocate of that. I try to, to be a brother to those type of, my fallen football players. I mean, I've had several players, the teammates and players throughout the NFL that are no longer here. And, certainly the concussion issue, the CTE and everything, that bothers me. That's something that you think about. And it's really something you just try to prevent and just kind of live with it.
You use the word advocate, and you've joined the fight against homelessness. Mm-hmm. We each have a heart for that. I was astounded, I'll bet you were too, to find that there are over 300,000 Texans, not Americans, Texans, who between the ages of 18 and 24 will encounter homelessness. That's almost unbelievable in America.
It really is. And I think since I've gotten involved, I know you've been involved. I know you're with Austin City. You've done a lot of being an advocate for those type of organizations and getting involved with Lisa Marshall and fighting homelessness and the statistics. And we're talking about young kids, 18 to 24, and try to get them in an environment and get them ready to be able to be introduced to the world, to give them a job. And, and I think that that's the path that people don't understand. And every time I see someone on the street, I just kind of wonder, it's like, how did they get there?
Yes.
But I think the most important thing, Norm, is the 18 to 24, and, the statistics for them to survive and move on and maybe get a college degree, and more importantly, have a place to call home and be able to, have a hot meal, have a bed to sleep in when it's 106 degrees outside, thinking that these kids or whatever their situation, and give them an opportunity. And I think that the organization has done a great job with that and being able to create housing. And, the percentages are very, very low for them to progress and move on. And I think that that's the awareness thing, Norm, as you know, is being able to see that through. And it's a great organization. It takes a lot of volunteers. You're involved, I've been involved, and to see people and see the stories of the kids that have overcome a lot of adversity and where they are now, that's when they're making an impact. And that's really what you want to see and be part of. And I just try to do as much as I can to be just a small part of it, to help the organization and create awareness.
Tony and I will be part of a big pickleball tournament. It's March 7th at Brookhaven. And we'd love for you to join up and join the fight against homelessness. And just go to this website, fightinghomelessness.org. fightinghomelessness.org, and join Tony and I at Brookhaven. Tony, I did not know whether to ask you a question or two about this today. But we think of athletes, star athletes, and we think of untroubled lives. And that is so far from the truth. Because athletes encounter really difficult situations all the time. Tony, if you would, Tell us about the passing of your wife just a few months back.
Well, Norm, I really wanted to, come on here and really just thank people that, lost my wife unexpectedly about 5 months ago. And more importantly, I want to thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers and, your support for you and your wife. And, I never, being a tough football player, and experiencing injuries and having to go through training camp and, playing with a broken bone and, that's pain. But losing someone that you've been your soulmate for 31 years is it's hard to fathom and totally unexpected. And to lose your best friend, your soulmate, grandmother, father, your mother, your children, it's just it affects so many layers. And I've learned through the grief and be able to grieve and it's like an open wound. Every day is just trying to kind of close it just a little bit where it's not hemorrhaging. And it's difficult. And you always want to be this tough guy. You always want to be, someone that doesn't cry or doesn't feel. But that's, obviously that's doesn't happen in something like this because, the gravity is something like that. Just someone being here perfectly healthy, and then an hour later they're gone. It's just, something. It's a nightmare. When my wife was a fighter. She was a breast cancer survivor, healthy, and to wake up and an hour later and they're gone, and to wholly change your life and out of body experience and thinking, is this really happening? You understand? Your question is why. But now I'm moving through this and the grieving and having to talk, doing, reading books and talking to other people and doing through therapy, that wound is like I said, it closes. And it just seems like, 50% of the time, you want to live in the present, but 50% of the time you're sad, and that's just part of the process. And so I just, the thing I would say is that the tears and everything that you go through, it's not weakness. It's the depth of the love you have for someone. And I sure had a lot of love for her. She was a basic person. And like I said, I'm just grateful for having her presence. The people that have called me and have supported the celebration life. I mean, you can't just do it. My family, my kids, I mean, they've been strong through this. We've been together and been able to navigate through this. But, it takes time, and there's a lot to be said for waking up the next morning and saying, thank you for this day, because honestly, it changes your whole mentality. It changes your perspective of the things that bother you. And, I don't say this just because I'm 62 or I'm telling this for everyone. My son, they feel the same way. Those little things that you worry about, the chase and everything that you're trying to accomplishment, all of a sudden, man, they don't mean as much.
Yeah. Tony, you asked that question, why? Stash that question, keep it with you for the rest of your life, and make that the first question you ask God when you see him. Why?
Well said. Well said.
God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Norm. I always enjoy talking to you, and it's just an honor to talk with you and be on your show. I mean, you're just you're a staple of the media, and you've got so much knowledge and so much entertainment. And again, when people talk to you, they come away a lot smarter and knowledgeable about not only sports, horse racing, whatever it is. It seems like you have a way to put things in perspective, and I really appreciate that, my friend.
Know that you're loved.
Thank you.
Bye, Tony. Thank you for the time so much.
Yes, sir.
Stolen Water Media is making a move. After 2+ years, it's time to change and keep up with our growth. You can continue to view all 8 of our podcasts on our Patreon pages. But now, you can get all episodes at www.stolenwatermedia.com. This is a developing story, but you can begin by watching and listening right now at www.stolenwatermedia.com. Continue to find all audio wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and some you may not have heard of, but I think will enjoy. Are you just wondering where your next spectacular vacation will be? Relax, feel the sun on your body, let your cares melt away at the all-inclusive Serenian Bay Resort in southern Belize. It's literally built right on the sand. The ocean, your ocean, is just a few barefoot steps away. Laid-back luxury, terrific food, a swim-up bar, a spa, air-conditioned gym, unimaginable service, fishing, snorkeling in gorgeous turquoise waters. Do you want relaxation or do you need adventure? You choose at Serenian Bay. Mary and I have been there 3 times, and this summer will be number 4. Pick a cozy bungalow for 2 or bring the whole family to villas that can accommodate up to 14. SerenianBay.com. SIRENIAN. The sand and the sea are just waiting for you to get here. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of people lost a really good friend on Sunday when former Mavs head coach Don Nelson passed away in Hawaii at the age of 86. I was one of those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of people. Nelly stood about 6'6", weighed 220, 230, but he was larger than life in a lot of different ways. He loved to laugh, and he loved to make people laugh, which he did in nearly 50 years in the NBA as a player and coach. He was here for 7 years as a Mavericks coach, and for most of those, he was a regular guest on my morning sports talk show every Thursday for the 6+ months of the season. Nelly was there as a guest. One year, the Mavericks were looking to add a wing shooter to their team, and it was right at the trade deadline. And that morning, Nelly was a guest, and the evening before, a guy named Tracy Murray had been traded. So I asked Nelly if the club had been interested in Tracy Murray, who was a wing shooter. And Nelly said, "Nah, he's a pain in the ass." And then he paused and he said, "Should I have said that?" I think it was too late, Nelly. Nelly and his son, Donnie, focused on a gangly German teenager, Dirk Nowitzki, believing he'd turn into a star. By the way, Nelly also traded for Steve Nash, and at Golden State, he pushed for them to draft Steph Curry. Early one game, Dirk, who was really struggling his first year plus, early one game that second season, Dirk had been throwing more grenades. He'd been shooting terribly for a long time. And Nelly called timeout in the game, and as everybody trooped back to the bench and gathered around in a huddle, Nelly waited for everybody to get there, and he looked at Dirk and said, "What's up with your shot?" And people started laughing, and it broke the tension. And Dirk's shooting slump ended also. He took over in 1997 for the fired Jim Clemens. The Mavericks at that point had been the worst pro franchise on the face of this planet. Don't know about the others, but this planet. They'd had 5 head coaches in 5 years. Richie Adebayo, Gar Hurd, Dick Motta, Quinn Buckner, and Jim Clemens. Their average record for the 5 years before Nelly arrived was 22-60, which, by the way, was exactly the record Nelly coached in his first season. And the year 2 started slowly also. But Nelly had found some good players. He'd added Nash and he'd added Dirk. And they just weren't quite figuring it out yet. They were still children in this league. So we met for lunch early that season at a place called The Point, a burger joint on Lover's Lane in Greenville. And as we were talking, Nelly said he'd figured out just how long it would be before he was going to be fired. December 28th. He had the date circled on his calendar. He told me December 28th. If he could just make it to December 28th, the schedule eased up some, and he thought the kids would start playing better. Well, he made it to December 28th. And that team that had started 9 wins and 23 losses then finished the last 50 games at 31-19. And the race was on for the Mavericks. Each of the next 5 seasons, they'd win at least 52 games until Nelly was fired by Mark Cuban in a dispute over how to run the basketball team. And that was the golden rule. The man who had the gold made the rules. Big Nelly had friends everywhere. He had some of the world's most high-profile people in his circle. His giant, legendary poker games included Willie Nelson, Woody Harrelson, the actor Owen Wilson, and lots of other just regular people, one of whom Nelly told me was named Big Sam. I never met Big Sam, but I often wondered what Big Sam did for business. Nelly was a brilliant innovator as a coach and brilliant in many ways. He was on a Celtics team that won 5 world championships. And Nelly took some of the money he earned in those years and started buying property on Maui, in Hawaii. One year I visited Nelly in Maui, and he picked me up at the airport at his old pickup truck with 2 dogs in the front seat. Nelly always had dogs around. He would own 6 of them, or 7 of them, or 8 of them, or 9 of them at a time. I don't think even Nelly could take count. And he would then take me to a tour of all of his properties in Maui. He made one of them into a beautiful wedding chapel and wedding reception site. He had places all over Maui. And when the fires struck Maui, Nelly invited those left homeless to come stay in some of his properties. And along about 8 or 10 years ago, he also started growing his own brand of marijuana on the side on some of these properties. And he called it Nelly Kush. Honestly, I can't believe Don Nelson's gone. How could a man who had such enormous life in him no longer be alive?
And now a word from our title sponsor. Today's episode has been brought to you by Fluent Financial, Retire Earlier, Live Better, and by Bob's Steak and Chop House on Lemon in Dallas and in Craig Ranch in McKinney. Bob's, a Dallas tradition for more than 30 years.
If you've enjoyed Just Wondering, please hit follow, and a fresh new episode will land in your mailbox early every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. Should you know a sports fan who might like our work, please share our contact information with that person. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Just Wondering. I'm Norm Hitzges, and know that every day I'll be just wondering about something.
And I'm Mary Hitzges, and I'll just be wondering too.
This is a Stolen Water Media production.